Have you ever wondered why we feel pain? The answer is the nervous system.
The nervous system is the network of nerve cells that transmits nerve impulses between parts of the body. It is responsible for our sense of touch. The nervous system can be intimidating, as it is very elaborate. However, it can be broken down into simpler parts. The simplest part of the nervous system is the neuron. A neuron, or nerve cell, is a cell that transmits nerve impulses. The dendrites are the shorter projections that receive messages from other neurons. There are usually many dendrites branching out from one cell body. In contrast, axons are the longer offshoots that send the messages from the neuron to other neurons or necessary cells. Many axons have what is called a myelin sheath, which allows signals to travel down the axon faster. Myelin wraps around the axon, leaving little gaps in the wrapping, known as nodes of Ranvier. The synapse is the name for the gap between two neurons. Information flows from one neuron to another across the synapse.
Scientists believed the majority of synaptic communication was electrical until the early 1900s when a gap between neurons was discovered. This gap, now known as a synapse, suggested that neurons could communicate using chemical messengers. These chemicals are called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are stored in the axon terminal in the presynaptic side of the synapse. Action potentials trigger the release of the neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft through exocytosis. If they bind to receptors on the postsynaptic end, they will have either an excitatory or inhibitory effect. An inhibitory effect keeps the neuron from reaching its action potential threshold, while an excitatory effect would cause the neuron to fire, in turn communicating with other neurons. Over 100 different neurotransmitters have been identified, but only around 10 are thought to control most functions. The same neurotransmitter can often be linked to several processes, explaining comorbidities between disorders.
But how do neurons send messages to each other? Well, they do this electrochemically. This means that chemicals cause an electrical signal. The important ions used in the nervous system are sodium, potassium, calcium, and chloride. It is also important to remember that nerve cells are surrounded by a membrane that allows some ions to pass through and blocks the passage of other ions. This type of membrane is called semi-permeable. Neurons that aren't sending signals are said to be at rest. When at rest, the inside of the neuron is more negative than the outside. The ions want to balance out the sides of the membrane. However, only some of the ions can pass through the ion channels. When the neuron sends information down an axon, an action potential occurs. Action potentials are the result of depolarizing current. When the action potential reaches a threshold, the neuron will fire an action potential. However, if it does not reach the threshold, it will not fire. After the action potential occurs, the neuron resets and prepares to fire when it receives the next signal.